differentiated funding. To start with, I would like maybe to go around the panel and introduce ourselves. My name is Tariq Linjawi. I'm the advisor to His Excellency, the Governor of the Small and Medium-Sized Business Entity. I'm in charge of the investment and funding arena in Saudi when it comes to that entity. So I'll just maybe introduce the panel. Rayan.
Hi, my name is Rayan Sindi. I'm also at SMEA, Small Medium Enterprises Authority. I work under Tariq, and I'm also the funding manager.
Hi, I'm Chris Rogers from Lumia Capital. We're a San Francisco-based VC, but we do spend a fair amount of time in MENA, and I've been coming here for about 20 years. I did a deal with STC, with my company that I started in the US, Nextel, probably 19 years ago.
I'm Hani Anaya. I'm the managing director of Riyadh Taqniya Fund, Riyadh and San Francisco-based $120 million VC fund.
Abdelaziz Jazzar, managing partner of Malas Capital. We manage a 600 million riyal fund for SMEs, and I'd like to think that we were one of the first VCs in Kingdom in 2001.
I'm Kamal Fareed. I'm managing director with Blue Vine Ventures, a former entrepreneur, now venture capitalist. We're launching this year a 600 million SAR VC fund focused on SMEs in partnership with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
My name is Mansour Al-Misfir from Blue Vine Ventures. I'm managing director also, and I'm based in Riyadh and looking for hopefully a great roundtable so we could work on this as well.
Hi, I'm Aman Verji, the Chief Operating Officer of 500 Startups, the world's most active venture capital investor. I am based in New York and in Silicon Valley.
Hello, happy to join this this discussion. I don't think I'm part of the roundtable. My name is Amro Fareed. I'm a professor at Dartmouth.
Assalamu alaikum, and that goes the same for me. I'm Kamal Youssef Toumi, professor at MIT in mechanical engineering.
Sultan bin Khalid, part of the RTF fund, and we invest in ICT, energy, and sustainability globally.
Hi, I'm Hassan Haider. I'm a partner at 500 Startups. I actually manage Middle East and North Africa operations. So as Aman said, we're a Silicon Valley-based fund. We're very active. We've already done 39 investments in the region, and there's another 30 in the pipeline before the end of the month. 20 before the end of the month, another 20 before the end of the year.
Hello, my name is Khalil Al-Shafi. I'm the managing director of WAD, which is called Saudi Aramco Entrepreneurship Venture Capital and Center at the same time. We basically invest in seed funds. We give you the money. We don't ask you to pay it back. We invest in venture capital as well, and also we give loan, which is very cheap money loan. We only ask for 50,000 as management fee and 7 years to pay back. So call me.
Thank you. I think it should be a very interesting discussion, inshallah. Just kind of to set the stage, I think the whole purpose of this committee meeting, whatever you want to call it, is to understand the challenges that Saudi Arabia is facing in terms of funding. And please, no show boasting about what we have, because the challenges that we have are tremendous, especially on the venture side and the funding side. And also maybe to get some experiences, cross-border experiences, and some opportunities that we can tap onto, inshallah, over the next year or so. So just kind of to set the stage, in terms of financing, obviously it comes in second, which is one of the most important things, important challenges that are facing our ecosystem today. And I'm talking about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in particular, and the SMEs. Bureaucracy is number one. There are a lot of initiatives around bureaucracy, ease of doing business, and changes are happening at a quick pace. And financing comes in a strong second. So obviously this is something that's very important for us. It is something that we're taking very seriously. And we have about 17 initiatives to tackle that portion. So again, if you look at, I know that maybe in this panel you have a few people who are very active in the funding bit. But outside of this room, there are very few very few active VCs, PEs, whatever you want to call them. So if we start with most of the equity portion or the funding portion for a startup or an SME comes from personal sources. And this has been going on for the past 30, 40 years. It hasn't really changed. And then you have family and friends. Bank loans are very, very little, and we're talking about guaranteed backed bank loans. And again, so it's not a very, very strong ecosystem. Angel investors, VC investors. So you can see, that whole area here is actually where we want to focus on, because at the end of the day, you can start a business, but to sustain a business, you still need funding at different stages. And this is where we are going to focus on at the SME agency, and hopefully, this panel can discuss it in much more detail. So again, to kind of look at it from a macro picture and understand where the opportunity lies, we actually developed a high-level strategy as of now. This is not finalized, but again, we looked at it from an ecosystem perspective. So obviously, it's governed by this ecosystem, but on the left-hand side, which is this side, there's the debt side, and this side, there's the equity side. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the debt side. Indirect lending through banks and other institutions is something that we're looking forward to. Maybe establishment of an SME bank or SME banks, similar to what happens in Turkey, is again an initiative that we are discussing with different parties. And then you have the product side. So if you go to the product side, there is obviously the IT infrastructure. We're talking about peer-to-peer lending here. We're talking about invoice discounting. These are things that are not happening today, okay? Or very few companies actually do it. So it's something that we're very interested in, and we believe that it's going to create a lot of value to the entrepreneurial society. Obviously, the regulation is the enabler. So we cannot do all of these things without enabling the regulation, cutting the red tape across. Now, today's discussion is mainly about the equity financing side. And on the equity financing, we want to focus on priority sectors. We're not going to invest in everything. We're going to prioritize, and we're going to build it up across the next few years. So there are a few things. We want to establish a fund of fund. There was an announcement, a royal decree, I think a few months back, that the government is going to establish a 4 billion real fund of fund. That's about $1.15 billion. And this fund is going to help establish or support the SME sector. So it's not a purely development fund. It's a commercially driven development fund. So we're talking about IRRs that are north of 5%, but south of 10%, something like that. Again, it's established. It's a collaboration between the small and medium-sized agency and PIF, which is the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. And the announcement of the board establishment should be coming out in the next 2-3 weeks. The other thing that is of essence here is the establishment of direct funding. And we're talking about establishing different vehicles of VC funding, whether it's regulated under the our kind of SEC, which is the CMA, or establishment of smaller micro venture capital funds. And again, we have very, very few of these. Again, we're looking at whether the government, and this is, I think, a point of discussion where we can collaborate. There are different models in the States, in Malaysia, in Japan, where the government had to intervene in creating funds or creating a mega fund that eventually became a subsectorial, bunch of funds, and then it was PPP'd or privatized. So maybe this is something that we can discuss today, because there is a gap, and we need to move very fast, and we need to support that sector very fast, because the target of the SME sector is to become about 35% in terms of contribution to the economy. Again, I'm just going to go very fast. I'm going to flip through these slides. As you can see, these are kind of key differentials between developed economies and KSA. VC industry, actually, we don't even have a VC industry per se. We have a private equity industry that was established in 2000. It's very nascent. I think Dr. Abdulaziz is actually one of the kind of pioneers of that industry, especially when it comes to SME. Most of the private equity firms actually do not focus on SMEs. I was actually one of them when I was in my ex-investment banking life. In terms of PE VC players, as you can see, developed countries have between 30 to 50 usually. We're talking about major players here. In Saudi, 5 to 7. Investment focus established there. We're talking about the different kind of area of investing. Fundraising is a challenge, and I think some people around the room here will tell you that it's a big challenge, including myself. I actually ran my own VC firm for quite a while, and fundraising is a big, big challenge because a lot of people do not trust in this asset class. Deal sourcing, I think this is a point of discussion. Some people will tell you that we have a lot of deals. Many would tell you that we don't have enough, sexy or mature deals where we can invest and understand that these guys will take it to the next level. So again, in terms of market development, as you can see, Saudi is actually very low compared to the G20. This is something that we don't accept. We want to be at the medium, at least, in terms of contribution. So what we're thinking of, again, and this is at a high-level kind of framework, we want to establish, angel or seed funding funds or networks where they can invest in startups. VC firms, or at least the micro VC portion of it, can also invest in startups. You have the private equity firms that can also invest in SMEs. And these are backed by institutional investors, the fund of funds, and the private sources that come from different entities across the kingdom. Again, this is the structure that we're working on. We want your opinion, your experience, to whether these things that would work and what would be the challenge for the kingdom to kind of undertake such initiatives. The challenges here is obviously, as we said, lack of VC firms to invest in, lack of co-investors, the small ticket size, exit risk. This is something that does not happen in a very structured manner in Saudi. We don't have a lot of exit opportunities. Trade sales are very few and very nascent in Saudi. So you have either the primary market IPO or now what we call the parallel market IPO, which actually gives an opportunity for companies to exit. But again, these are not startup companies. These are SME companies that have been there for at least 3-4 years. And there are minimum thresholds that need to be managed. So if we talk about the initiatives, we talked about, there's the supply side and there's the demand side. The supply side, we need to establish seed funding, again, to kind of create that industry from the start, support it from the start. VC funding, where we can take it to the next level, post-revenue kind of engagement, and then the private equity, where it can take companies to maturity. And then you have, the direct investors that can go even to pre-seed. So pre-seed, we're talking about university ideas where you can support them with even grants at that level, and then you go to the seed level, the VC. Obviously, the private equity and secondary market are now kind of entangled in Saudi because we have this parallel market which gives you an advantage, to some businessmen over the private equity arena. Okay, so the purpose, again, I think, I'm not going to go into this, but the fund of fund, I think we talked about. We talked about why it was established. It was established to support the funding of VC and private equity funds who want to support the SME or entrepreneurial arena. Now, there is a challenge to this. We don't have VC funds. We don't have enough private equity funds. So this fund of fund is going to basically, be at this level, 4 billion riyals roaming around. And unless we create entities which can go down the value chain and invest in these businesses, you're just going to have a vacuum in the middle. And I think this is something that's maybe a point of not only discussion, but a challenge for us going forward. And again, your experience, I think, will help in moving this forward, because we all understand that this is a challenge for us. And again, I think, the fund kind of sits in the middle. We've established the Private Equity Venture Capital Association. Dr. Abdulaziz Jazzar can actually talk to you about it much more. It's actually the voice of the practitioners, okay? to help alleviate some of the regulatory and non-regulatory issues that the private equity and venture capital firms are suffering from. And then in terms of regulation, I think most of the entities that are in charge of the regulatory bodies in Saudi are working together to ease the commercial terms, the exit terms, the capital calls that are not very foundational at this stage, to be very structured. In terms of SME development, again, you need the accelerators, you need the mentors, you need the support elements to be able to invest in opportunities that are much more sustainable today. The issue with establishing companies today in Saudi is that most of these companies will not last for long, not only because of lack of funding, but because of lack of support. So, many entrepreneurs, we call them serial entrepreneurs, and this is not something that we're proud of. A serial entrepreneur in the Western world is somebody who actually made it, and actually exited successfully and did something right. In Saudi or in the Middle East, it's somebody who just, opened like 5, 6 companies parallel. And not committed. Yeah, exactly, parallel. Thank you, honey. So, again, I don't think we need to go into that, but as you can see, in terms of contribution to GDP, this is where we came up with the 4 billion riyals in terms of fund of fund. So if you're talking about Malaysia, the fund as a percent of GDP is 0.16. Actually, what we need in terms of investment in Saudi to be close to that is about 6.8 billion in funding. And this is on the equity funding alone. We're not talking about the debt side. Actually, the debt side is very low. It doesn't exist. So that's what we're talking about. It doesn't really exist. So with that being said, this is kind of the end of the presentation. I think the main aim now is to have a discussion around a few key points. One is, the experiences that our colleagues across the oceans have come up with and developed. The SBA program, for example, in America is something that's very interesting for us, and it's something that maybe we can mimic. Talking about maybe the fund of fund and the opportunity in that and the challenge, and then maybe talking about or discussing collaborative opportunities that we can actually action in the next few months together. With that being said, does anybody want to take the lead?
Thank you. Let me start like the first thing said, we had lack of money, lack of fund. And actually, I think it's exactly the opposite. There's so much money. There's so much money, but we don't getting a lot of quality ideas. And that's the problem we're seeing. Like, for example, WIDE, just for our venture capital, $300 million, and we only invested almost 12 million over 4 years. And the problem is just the ideas that coming is not like the quality ideas that you can invest in. So that's one thing. The other thing is our regulation make it very difficult for a startup to register and move. The registration process with the government, it's make it such a nightmare. So people kind of try to move out of the country, go somewhere else, go to Dubai or go another country, and maybe that's why we're not seeing these quality ideas coming in. So I have 2 guys. They were sitting beside me in the bus. I recorded them. They better be talking to me or I'm going to report them to SME. They're trying to move out of Saudi Arabia with their ideas. So we're going to corner them, okay? So in WIDE, we do also seed fund. So we give 100,000 riyal, and we only have 3 so far, over 4 years. Because again, this is 100,000 riyal just for you to work with your idea, and we actually provide you the space. Whatever you need, it's there. You just come there and you do your work, and you use the money to buy whatever things you need. We get you the computers, we get you whatever you need. So the other money just to get going. And then we have the loan. We're trying to slowly get out of the loan business and move it more into a VC business. But the loan is take advantage of it. It is up to 5 million riyals, no interest. You only pay 50,000 riyal as a management fee at the beginning. You have 2 years grace period, and then you have 5 years to pay it in installment. So that is like an easy money as well. And so these are basically the I would say the vehicle we have. In addition, as I mentioned, we have the incubator and accelerator, and also we do a lot of training, because what we find out, a lot of people don't know how to put a business plan, operating plan, and also some of the people who come to us, they don't know how to scale up. And as somebody mentioned in this afternoon, almost 75% of the companies fail because they don't know how to scale up. They get too excited, they go and hire too many people, and then the VC, some VC, they see them, oh, this guy's really doing well, they give them more money, and actually that hurt them even more because they think like they're doing something right, and then they end up failing. So we started a program, we call it Litanmu. Litanmu in Arabic means to grow, and we had it almost about a month ago with Babson College at the Mohammed bin Salman College at Cake. We had about 35 people who have companies. They started a few years, but they don't know how to really go beyond mom and pop shop. So the whole program was actually how to teach them how to go through the process. And I met one of the guys, and he said like that was the program was an eye-opening for him to really how to move forward. So this is just in summary. Like there are a lot of things. One more thing. We did a survey actually. The GEM report surveyed the Saudis, and it says Saudi Arabia as an opportunity for business. About 82% said Saudi Arabia #1 in business opportunities. We did our own survey through social media. We asked 1,000 people, if you have an idea, do you know where to go? 85% said no. So again, it's not lack, again, of ideas. There is a big gap between there is money, there is opportunities, there are ideas, but the people have ideas, they have no idea where to go. So this is my
Just a quick question. So, just ask a quick question. So, in the survey results that were shown in the slides, the #1 problem in the minds of small business owners was bureaucracy. The #2 was a lack of funding or lack of financing, and then there was a big gap to talent and some of the infrastructure and everything else. You're saying there's plenty of money. So, and in fact, you've given all these examples of things you're willing to do, but very few people are coming to take you up on it. Do you think in the mind of the small business owner, financing is do you agree that chart suggested it's a real problem, or do you actually think there is plenty of money and access to money? The problem is more in the education of the small business owner. They just don't really understand how to apply for the financing, or how to maybe the way to get the financing is so complicated and just difficult to understand that people just don't understand the process and just need to be educated on how to get at the money that's sitting there waiting for them.
It's a combination of everything you said. So to make it in summary, we also have a program called Litabda. Let's start. And this program, we have a group of 5.
Yeah.
They travel in all the regions, and we have it on our website. People sign up, they go there, they get them presentation about WIDE, and then sit down one-on-one with them. If they have an idea as how to work it out. But still, it's like like every meeting there is 15 people. I think also the culture, people always like to go to their mom and dad for money. And again, it's like mentioned, it's a family business. Everything is a family business. So when they invest and getting big is not in their mind, it's just making some money is in mind. I'm working, I'm making 5%, he's happy. And then they don't go beyond that. It's just this 5% coming annually, why I should take more risk. So it is a combination of the culture. That's why I said like Aramco was founded by Californians, right? The first people who came and looking for oil in Saudi Arabia were Californians. And they came with their families. Imagine, there was nothing in Eastern Province except desert. They came even with their families and set up whatever they can set up. And they have the culture of pioneering. The culture is really taking risk, exploring, seeing things. And the Saudis, we have that culture, but we lost it because we are nomads. We always move from place to place and take the risk, and you move the family. And now if you come to any Saudi, say, hey, we'll have a job for you in Sheba, he will cry. Okay, so it is a culture that we're trying to build and change. That's why we do the training. We are not like Silicon Valley people like come in. No, there is a training required.
I want to share with you a different model here. In 2001, me and two other partners started our own VC. We continued to say we are the only VC in the country, and nobody actually objected to it. So we seem to have been the first VC. But the model, and I will share with you that we had a very decent deal flow, and we actually did very well, alhamdulillah. But the model was a bit different. It wasn't a fund. It was our own money. And this level of service this was given to our portfolio companies were hands-on. We were 3 partners. We invested into 11 companies. And each one of us had a few that in the morning we wake up, we put our rotra, and we phone X and tell him, what do you want me to do today? And so all what Khalil was saying was right. You know, they don't know how to scale. There is deal flow, but they don't know how to structure it properly. They come in with a strategy that is wrong, so it needs restructuring and retweeting. And the bottom line is it was very successful. And I can tell you, alhamdulillah, without bragging too much, that we're talking about above 5 multiples, okay? But scalability for us was a problem. We couldn't take more than 11 investments. 12 investments was maximum. One of the 11 investments went belly up, so we ended up with 10 investments. So the issue was, in the West, when VC comes in, you expect the guy coming in to have some basic, understanding of finances or scalability or structuring the deal. Here, it isn't. So it needs hand-holding. So I'm going to say that if we're going to be developing early-stage investments, we need to have more small VCs so that the level of service that is provided hands-on, and scalability becomes a problem, so we need a lot of VCs. Now, moving up the chain a little bit, and this is where we are today, where we actually give growth funding. So there has to be, at least the sweet spot for us would be a turnover of 50, 60 million riyals before we start giving him any funding. And believe it or not, even with 50 or 60 million riyals, they continue. And Khalil, I think, had his hand right on the dot by saying they're growing at 5%, 10% every year. He makes a profit of 1 million riyal, which covers him, makes him feel very comfortable. So why the hell should he bring in a new investor? So I'm very happy where I am. However, with our 600 million riyal fund, we are getting very good deals. Our ratio is, we've done so far, I think, 12 or 14 investments. The ratio is 14 to 1. So out of 14 investments that we look at, we invest in 1, which I think is a little bit high. I think we can do better, but that's the quality of investments we get here. But you can't imagine the difficulty in scaling up for these. The point I'm making here is deal flow is there, but it needs nurturing in a special way. And I think the idea of big funds of $300 million to be funding early stage is not going to be practical, in the sense that you need funds of the value maybe 20 million riyals, 30 million riyals that will invest in 10 companies max. And then we need another stage, so there is exits across the food chain up to but in terms of opportunities, in terms of growth, I can't tell you. I'm a proof that this place is full of opportunities, and if you're on the right track, you can make a lot of money.
Actually, on that positive note, I totally agree. I mean, we are a new fund, and we started in Q3 2016. And when it comes to the deal flow, I mean, it's ironic because given the challenges in Saudi, actually the entrepreneurs who end up like making it, they really have like a high barrier of entry because they went through a lot, so they end up having very like healthy and lean businesses versus like the deals that we see in California, as Khalil said. I mean, they are like bloated in a way. But like the ones who make it here, actually, we're very happy, we're very excited, and we almost think it's like a kept secret. Most of the, yes, there's money available in the country, but I would say most of the funds are frozen. There is no velocity, and capital doesn't move easily as it moves in California, for example. So yes, and one thing also like we don't see happening here, or maybe like even though there's funding like available, I mean, it's always like ad hoc. You can't invest in VC ad hoc. You always have to consider the fund economics. So we'll see like lots of behavior when you see a high net worth guy invest in VC twice, he gets burned, and then that's it. I'll never do that again. So that can hurt a bit. So that's why we are happy to see some family offices now establishing legit VC funds and hire professionals and run them. And I think we'll see amazing things happening in the next 3 to 5 years.
Add something?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Or should I?
Yeah.
I really appreciated the gentleman's comment. Just in regard to the deals that you end up seeing nowadays are very lean and very well put together.
What's your name?
Sorry, my name's George Eidelhuber. I'm actually an entrepreneur here at Kaust. Just to give the entrepreneur side of the story, I would suggest to you, sir, that the reason that the startups you see entering the VC process being very lean is because they're the ones that haven't starved to death before getting to you. We had a competition recently where we had entrepreneurs coming from Europe, and they were shocked to discover that a lot of the early stage startups, tech startups, promising startups around technology that's being patented and going through the process, had to go through protracted adversarial venture capital negotiations to get $500,000 for seed money, where they in Europe had access to a number of different grants available with stringent guidelines to avoid waste, but to get ideas to the point where it would create deal flow for you gentlemen. Because right now in the ecosystems that I've been involved in, you've got startups being basically starved of funds to the point where entrepreneurs will give up. And if you get too many entrepreneurs giving up in the ecosystems you're trying to build, and you're unable to create these exemplars of success, you won't be able to attract high caliber entrepreneurs to funnel into your deal flow. And I feel that the absence of easily accessible grants to make startups go with a high risk tolerance and a high failure rate are what's stopping you guys from having the deals you need to make. And also the ones of us who really keep pushing inside the system, who are willing to spend 2 years in venture capital negotiations, are going to be very few and far between. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Muse, and I'm from a little town in Texas called Dallas. And in our world, we feel like the Saudi Arabia of the United States, because we always think we don't have very many funds in our market, that seed money is hard to get. So we actually probably feel the same way maybe you feel about venture capital and angel investing and so on. And I had two thoughts. One thought to kind of answer the entrepreneur's thought was that in the Valley, it's very easy to get money. Almost anyone can just get $250,000 or $500,000 if you have an idea with some basic requirements. And it takes very little time, maybe 3 months at all if you have any decent idea and any decent team. Who here is from 500 Startups? Are there a couple folks? Okay, great. Yeah, so I was in Dallas. I made a call to Dave McClure. I said, here's my idea. Had another call with Christine. She wanted to know about my idea. And within about, I don't know, a week, we had $250,000 or so from 500 startups. And that's kind of the velocity you need to keep entrepreneurs interested. And so there are probably 50 different folks that are doing that in the Valley, but they're also starting to do it outside of the Silicon Valley into the rest of the United States. So that's kind of my first thought. So that velocity really encourages entrepreneurs to I saw him do it, oh, I can do it too. And that's huge. But the other thing to think about, and you obviously know this in your country, is that, over half of the startups that are successful in my country are from made by individuals not from my country. They're immigrants, and they come to our country to start something. 40% of Fortune 500 companies in my country were started by immigrants or the children of immigrants. So the opportunity to bring more folks like that is if you can create a brand which says, you're allowed to come here, we're going to give you money almost immediately, and we want you to fail really, really fast so you can start a new company. We did this in the Dallas area. We started 10 years ago, we started an incubator called Tech Wildcatters. And the idea was that we wouldn't make any money. It was very similar to kind of the model that maybe 500 Startups does. But our idea was to encourage companies from outside of the area to come to our city. So over the last 10 years, we've had 50 companies from outside the United States move to Dallas to start their companies. And most of them failed. But we have about 400 individuals who worked for those companies that came to the Dallas area. They're now starting new companies. So we've built sort of a 10-year life cycle where now we were having a few companies starting. We now have lots and lots of companies starting all the time. But again, it really goes back to that velocity of funding. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, just to sort of talk about what we could do practically in terms of the Fund of Funds program. I think the launching of that Fund of Funds program is actually a great step because when you follow the money, I disagree with the people that say there's a lot of money available because there really isn't for the startups. We see a lot of good startups that aren't able to raise seed rounds or at the Series A aren't able to raise. So there is a lack of funding that's available in the market. When you follow the money back, it's because there isn't enough VC funds. There isn't enough VC funds because there's not enough LPs. I mean, in Silicon Valley alone, there's about 400 venture capital funds. So if one guy says no to you, there's another 399 to go to, and maybe one of them will actually be interested. And I think that building that critical mass of funds is what's important. I think it's not about having one large fund that has $2 billion because that one guy that decides will decide yes or no for your fate. What you need to do is correct. You set up a fund of funds where they're, as you said, they have 30 million reals or $10 million, $15 million, $20 million funds, and have a bunch of them. And then these are all sort of funded by sort of the government with a view to making money. But their next fund, they won't need the government support. The ones that are successful will be able to raise from the private sector just by pointing, like you very rightly said, I have a 5X fund. Why would you not give me an investment into my fund? So I think our strategy at 500 is sort of similar to that fund of funds concept. We have a global fund where we invest everywhere, but we also have a series of very small funds between $10 to $30 million in size in different geographies and segments where we back either people who are entrepreneurs or very active in that ecosystem, and we give them the chance to actually launch a fund and get started. And I think that's what's important. The fund of funds shouldn't go after an established bank like Real Bank or NCB or whatever. It should be like, let's go and find people who have the passion to launch a smaller fund, even though the economics are really bad. Your management fees will be almost nothing. But are willing to do that and put themselves through that because they have a belief in that ecosystem. So I think what the Fund of Funds project should be is like, let's invest in normal, larger funds as well, but let's find a group of 20, 30, 40 potential fund managers. Let's give them $5 million, $10 million. Let's train them, let's have them sort of piggyback with an existing fund manager that knows what they're doing. Let them support them for a year or two, and then they're off on their own to get things started. And that's something that's 500 we've actually been able to do in other markets. We've supported a fund of funds actually in the region in Oman where we were advising a similar project. But the other thing that you need to think about, it's all about asset allocation. Sort of the fund of fund is all about asset allocation. You need idea stage funds, usually those are grants. You need seed stage funds that'll help get from product to actual customer acquisition. You need scaling funds that'll scale growth. And then on the higher side, you need sort of private equity. But one of the things that might be interesting is figuring out a liquidity fund concept that actually allows the earlier investors to actually sell into this liquidity fund to generate liquidity both for their LPs and to reinvest and reallocate that funding. So you need to think about the whole funding life cycle. And yeah, generating liquidity for those earlier funds. So you might want to put aside $100 million or of that 4 billion reals to a liquidity fund concept where the angel investors who are using their own money and will run out of that money, or the early stage VCs can sell into this liquidity fund and generate more liquidity and capital for themselves to continue to reinvest and to distribute to their LPs. So it really is small, lots of small funds, build critical mass, support throughout the whole ecosystem, so all the way from idea up to exit, and I think that will be successful. But as you mentioned as well, you don't want to just focus on Saudi. You want to make sure that it's open to the region. That 4 billion riyals will have a massive impact on the entire MENA region in terms of venture capital. And that impact, if it comes from Saudi, will be successful for Saudi itself. Because Kareem, it's a huge company now. But when you look at it, one of the first earlier investors that came in were Saudi angel investors. They made a killing, and now all their friends are like, we should do this angel investment stuff. So it should be a wider mandate. It shouldn't just be, here's a fund for Saudi, we'll only invest in Saudi startups, because even startups that aren't from Saudi will eventually come to Saudi because this is one of the biggest markets in the region. So the mandate shouldn't be limiting in that sense as well. And then if you open up that mandate, no one can complain about deal flow because we see about 50 to 100 deals a month. And probably 5 of them are investable at our stage.
And you're based where?
I'm Bahraini, I'm in Bahrain, but the firm is a Silicon Valley-based fund. We've already done 3 commitments for Saudi companies, and there's another 4th on the way. So in terms of finding deal flow in Saudi, we're pretty happy. We're finding really good deals here. Yeah.
So we have a fair amount of deal flow here as well, but we have not invested in a single growth stage company. And I think the difference is that we see companies across the world. We do probably 60% of our investing is US based, but we also play in Southeast Asia and Latin America, Europe and the Middle East. And I think some of this disconnect, too much money, not enough money, lots of deal flow, lots of hands-on, is due to the transformation. It goes right back to that issue of if this is a GCC-wide or a region-wide initiative. Very soon, every one of the companies that any of us look at will be having to compete globally. This economy is becoming more and more global. The world economy is, the way we interact is requiring that, which means if you're not the best in the world or one of the best in the world at what you do, unless you have a very localized business, which is not really applicable for VC, then you're not going to be able to compete. So the goal, I believe, here is not to create a nice, quiet, insulated ecosystem of Saudi startups that can do well in Saudi. It's to create a global hub of technology building. And you are going to have to be very open in your approach to that. And obviously, you know, the 500 startups people, they're so active everywhere. It's amazing, and it's great for us because we invest at a later stage. We see their companies. They can make a difference, but that's because they don't only focus in one place. They support their smaller funds in one place by putting them in an ecosystem that is global.
So I'm going to build on a couple of the comments. So first of all, I'm a Texan, so you'll hear from now a Houstonian. You heard from somebody from Dallas. Again, I'm Kamal Freed with Blue Vine Ventures, and we are in Silicon Valley, we're in Texas, and we're in Riyadh. And with this fund, we're a for benefits fund. So like a lot of the fund managers here associated with government capital, sovereign capital, we are both achieving a return, okay, for our LPs, which are government institutions primarily, as well as a benefit, which is creating jobs, bringing technology content, creating SME entrepreneurship community. And our benefits thesis is that we will be investing most of our capital outside the US into companies that are ready to expand into the kingdom, and will create jobs here, create operations here like manufacturing, engineering, services, etc. That And this comes from the idea that you look at an area like Silicon Valley or other clusters of entrepreneurship like we have in Texas, and over years you had successful entrepreneurs decades ago, and the people who worked in those companies became more entrepreneurs, and then those became more entrepreneurs. And so you have to seed SME technology entrepreneurship, and that's going to be done both locally here with homegrown entrepreneurs, but it's also going to be done by attracting SME technology companies from around the world, have them set up shop here, hire our local youth here, and have them become experienced in entrepreneurship, and then they will become the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so that's a piece of it that we're going to add to the pie that I think will be rather interesting to see.
For the sake, I see nobody's moderating this, so I'm just going to try to, we were diverging, I want to converge a little bit. I think what we've heard some great ideas, and I just want to summarize. We talked about a liquidity fund, which I think is a great idea, which is an exit to all or maybe most of the early stage. So this is a liquidity fund that probably will be funded by the government, whereby the returns would be very modest, if at all, but then it will give the liquidity to the angel investors to start. So I think that's a great idea as an idea. We also, I think, seem to be agreeing that we need a lot of small VCs with different focuses, with different geographic sector or industry focuses, in addition to the PEs that will do the exits. So that's the second point that we raised. And there seems to be a consensus also on the fact that we need a GCC, regional, global funds that attract not only local, but have access to all technologies and all entrepreneurs in the region, if not globally. So these are the three areas that we are moving towards. I just wanted to summarize and maybe try to go further from here. How can we create, we're talking about entrepreneurs and not necessarily high-tech or technology companies here. We're talking about generically. How can we have a huge amount of universities. We have young generation in the GCC. How can we attract more technology companies created from the universities here? Can this make...
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite topics. Thank you. So if you look at the Silicon Valley, how Silicon Valley started, why did it become like a deep tech play? And you see many of them in Silicon Valley. What's the answer? What's the root for everything? I mean, basically, there was demand for tech from the government. I mean, you go back to the World War II, and basically you find the US government demanding high tech to help its efforts in World War II and then the Cold War. So the government demanded high tech, and then Stanford was the pioneer, and then the deans in Stanford created an ecosystem. So I'm very enthusiastic about the new military company, for example, and the new PEF initiatives, because part of their mandate is to create this demand in the economy. By localizing like military industries and like heavy industries as well, not even heavy, but high tech, then you can create a movement where actually there is a demand for high tech. And once you have this demand, you can work on the supply side. Because many of the initiatives now, if you look at the kingdom, like there's many like emphasis on the supply side of things, but there is no emphasis on the demand side of things. So that's why you see when it comes to entrepreneurship, you see many like consumer electronics or like or internet companies and copycats, basically, similar to what's happening in Europe. Why? Because consumers are demanding services. So then you see entrepreneurs trying to basically fulfill this demand. But until you find government like basically demanding high tech, I don't think we will have a scalable supply. So, yeah.
And I think that's a very good point. It follows pretty well with things we do see in the U.S. For instance, the DC ecosystem is driven very much by the two biggest players in that. We have the largest medical research facilities in the world in DC, and we have the biggest buyer of security in the world in DC. And so you look at the tech ecosystem, and you would find that's where the funding is, and that's where the startups focus. And so it's quite a robust ecosystem around those. So I think that's a really good point. I just want to go back to one point about how you get these entrepreneurs locally to build tech and gravitate toward that. And I'll just reiterate, tech is global. And when we look across the world, we see entrepreneurs who they're very local, but the best almost always have some global experience. I don't know if it's my uncle lived in Ottawa, so I went there every summer, or I went to London School of Economics, or I was with the World Bank in DC for 3 years. Whatever it is, it's almost invariable that these best entrepreneurs have some global experience in the world, even if they're quite young. And of course, the programs here that send 50, I don't know how many thousand. 50,000. Yeah, 50,000 abroad is a great way to do it, because it does make a difference. And I would say do more of that too, because those are the ones that know how to play in global technology.
I just want to add from experience with Dahran Techno Valley and Aramco, when the inception was there. The issue, I think, and I agree with some of the sentences that was mentioned here, is speed when it comes to Saudi. And with the universities, Doctor, unfortunately, they hired professors to handle the venture capital funds of the university. And they don't want to take risk with early startups from the university. And that is an issue, I think, in the university ecosystem and trying to support entrepreneurs to commercialize IP. This is one of the things I've seen in KFUPM specifically, is we had great technology that could be a global technology, but unfortunately they couldn't be funded. And if they had to, go through a process with WAID or any other entities here, they take forever. I totally understand that, we are trying to put money on the table, but we're not giving it, unfortunately, to the entrepreneurs. We have rigorous, way of looking at deals. This is at least what I've seen in the university ecosystem. And even King Saud University, in the beginning, they started investing in their IP commercialization, but then after that, they said, no, it's too risky. We want to go and invest in Japan. They invested in Japan and in the US, and they invest in not early stage, unfortunately, now.
You can't save that. One thing I want to mention is our mission is get things done. Okay, so one of the problems, our problems actually, we gratify our success that does not exist. One of the things is ecosystems. You hear this ecosystem and everywhere in Saudi Arabia. Couch say, I have an ecosystem. And then you look at them, they really don't have an ecosystem. They have students, they have teachers, they have ideas, they have a small fund, but they have no idea to the market, nobody how to take it to the next level. Same thing at Techno Valley. If you go and say, hey, there's Halliburton, and there's Baker Hughes. If you go to Techno Valley, each one of them has a fence around it and a security, and you cannot get in unless somebody invite you. So there isn't like what we call an ecosystem, but if you talk to them, they say, we have an ecosystem. So the way I said, you guys don't have an ecosystem. What we have? Aquariums. Each one has his own aquarium with some fish in it and some artificial reef, and start believing like it has an ecosystem. So okay, what are we gonna do? So we started a think tank. We call it Innovation Ecosystem Think Tank. And so far we had 3 meetings. We invited people from Jeddah, Riyadh, Eastern Province, Bahrain, Dubai, and start building this community of ecosystem and start linking the incubators in every area and bring them over to our programs. And so we went from 20, now we are at 55 And we were shooting for next September meeting to take it higher, to really build the ecosystem that is needed. Even in the US, a lot of people, we keep saying US. Actually, it's not a US, it's Silicon Valley, okay? Because if ecosystem was simple to do, then why not, there is no Silicon Valley in every US state. Even the one they tried it, they couldn't make it. Chicago, I think, was a good example. The governor, the state, they did like how Saudi do. Put money, make it easy taxation, da-da-da-da-da-da. They started, but then Silicon Valley was like a magnet. And the reason, because they have lawyers for free. You walk in there, say, hey, I'm a startup, I need this. Oh, sure, come here. They give you whatever you need. Even I think one of the law firms, they put the whole agreement on the website so anybody can print it, change it, and go to your VC person. Again, when we say we have a lot of VCs, the same thing. Like if I'm in a specialized area, you come to me, I don't invest in your kind of business, but Smith does. So he sends you to Smith. Here we don't have that kind of ecosystem, so I don't know what you invest in. So if somebody comes to me, it's not my area, I have no idea where to send them. He said he has a lot of people coming, but he's limited. I'm not limited. So if we know each other, he say, you know, I'm done, I cannot take any more, go to Khalid. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to build, and even though we are here, just to give an example, we talk, but we don't walk. I asked the organizers, give me the list of the people attended. So I have the network. Oh, we don't know. We don't think we can do that. Which name do you want? I said, I want them all. No. We did not discuss it with our management. We need to go back. So even though the whole idea of being here is networking and knowing who is here, so we can reach out to them. So one thing, if you guys want to help, tell the organizers, give us the name, so we can talk to each other. We don't need a conference or a summit. We'll be communicating on a regular basis.
Can you talk about the association?
Can I add just like one quick point about like university IP and the lack of funding or speed? I think also there's lots of missing elements. Like we personally, like we were successful in like starting a business in Los Angeles based out of UCLA, where we actually licensed an IP and then built a company on it. We didn't get VC money until like later. So I mean, I remember the first funding we got. I mean, first you start with the PhD students. PhD students were all funded by DARPA, right? Government agency. Private sector will never like fund PhD students in universities. After that, when we licensed the IP, we got like $150K, just $150,000 from the US Air Force, small business initiatives. All what they look at is basically, you have like cutting edge tech, and we'll fund the R&D. We don't care about the business case. Just because you're unique in technology, we're gonna fund you. This is phase one. Phase two is like $1 million. You succeed in like reaching certain milestones, then there's $1 million for you to like enhance the R&D. So these are some of the things that actually the SME authority can help as well. Not like VC per se, like R&D for like tech companies. And this can perhaps like help in seeding these opportunities.
Sure. I want to comment on Khalil's. I think the
Finish you have active audience participation. Yeah.
So. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to comment on the fact that today the SME authority is creating an association. And I really would love to get your card because you're not going to leave here without being part.
Innovation Association Eastern Province.
It's a PE and VC PE Association for the Kingdom. So if one way to get to talk to each other is to internally start talking to each other. So.
Now I know your card.
Ahmed Al Ghazi. I am Saudi and I have a startup in Silicon Valley. I have few points regarding the investment ecosystem. I think one of the biggest challenges in the VC industry in Saudi is exiting companies. So most companies in the valley, either they get acquired, and this is most probably what will happen, or go to IPO. The problem with Saudi, there is no acquisitions. So it's a cycle. So if there's no acquisitions, there's no returns, then as an LP, why I put money to VCs to invest money? So I think this is like the chicken and egg problem we have. We can solve that by two things, or in two ways. One way is to structure a new financial instrument where you can, I don't know, you get dividends or you make profits or something out of it. Because if you cannot exit, you cannot make returns, you cannot, so you're stuck. In the Valley, it's different, and I'll tell you why it's different. The big thing in the Valley and why the Valley is successful, most products are built to the global market. This is one of the factors why you see all these big companies. And the ecosystem started in the Valley, like somehow some people started companies, they became big, and they have access to a lot of cash, like Google and all these big companies, that they can acquire other companies, so it's a cycle. Here we don't have this yet, and we have the chicken and egg problem where we need to solve either by changing the VC model by maybe investing and getting returns, or trying to motivate Saudi entrepreneurs to build global companies. And I think a lot of now, Germany, maybe Berlin, a lot of companies started to build global products. Like Spotify and Israel, they are doing that too. Another way to do it is to do it like the Israeli way, where most of the know-how, I don't know if we have the strength to do that, but the technical things happening in Israel, and most of Israeli companies, they go and start business development offices in the US, and they get acquired, and so they build the technology in Israel, which is way smaller than us, but they have the know-how. And I think military, going back to your point, military is the main reasons of what's happening. Then they build companies there, they open R&D or biz dev in Silicon Valley, and they get sold. And one of the examples is Waze and Wix and so on. So there's a lot of examples this happened this way. So I believe Saudi entrepreneurs need to think in a global manner in order to overcome the challenge of having a small market and local market where there's no acquirers in the market, and you get into the loop. Another comment regarding, I think there's two main strategies for investing. One is almost spray and pray, and like you invest in so many companies and you hope, the math, or you select few, as you mentioned, like 10 or 12, and just bet on them and make sure. If it's not the other model, if it's not your personal money, I don't know how you make money as a VC. Should you get, because 2%, or like if you take like 2% management fee and 20 carry, it will not work. You cannot like have 3-4 partners. 2% of 20 million is, so you will go through this problem. So maybe also you can create a different model. I think it works maybe because you're investing your own money. So you're not,
So you're saying bigger than 2%, or what's the point here?
So I don't know how the VC.
You're saying 2% is not going to be enough for
enough for the partners for small funds.
So should you think 5?
I don't know if it needs to be this way, or maybe it's salaries and and then you may get salaries, certain salaries or something.
How is it done in the U.S.?
I think this is the challenge. It's done in the U.S. one way. It's almost like an angel investment, so there's no operational cost, where people just get the money and try to.
Sorry. Okay. So we have a small fund, and it is now the target size is 30, and we're doing a 2 and 20 model. yes, I'm not going to be a millionaire on the management fees, but that's not what I'm aiming for. And there are a lot of funds in Silicon Valley that are between $10 to $30 million in size, micro funds that do exist.
And they're still 2 and 20?
They're still 2 and 20. Some of them go up to 2.5, maybe up to 3. But the problem is, if you actually increase your management fee too high, how are you going to return 1x back to your investors? Like the recycling that you'll have to do is ridiculous. So no, don't increase your management fees. Be lean and hope that your next fund will be much bigger, and rely on making amazing investments so that you'll become a millionaire on the carry, not on the management fees. Like for me, the management fees it's tough. Like you can't build a huge team, but still you can get a couple of partners that are actually interested and are dedicated and believe that in their capabilities of generating that carry. And yeah, you don't survive on management fees unless you're raising $1 billion fund or something.
But I do think there may be a difference, because you are sounding like you have a fairly long timeline to exit. And if that's the case, that management fee structure may not work perfectly, because if you're trying to run 3 or 4 companies for 5 years, you can't really start a new fund every 2 years. You can't fund a new fund and build up sort of a pile of management fees. So, and I don't think any of us know the answer. There may be some novel thinking. I mean, it's a fair point that if you want to have multiple funds that are small with a lot of VCs in training, you may have to come up with some alternative compensation models to bring some people in. It might be a good idea.
The liquidity fund seems to be also...
I think that's a great idea. And I just want to mention one more thing that I think, I don't want to be critical of this ecosystem, except that the fund structures that I often see have this additional layer that may go back to the comment about the university systems. And there tend to be, and I can kind of picture the prayer beads and the whole worry scene down here, another layer. Like, we're called the investment committee, and we trust you enough to put money there, and you're our GP, and you're going out and looking for these deals, and you're meeting the entrepreneurs, and you're vetting them, and you're writing the investment memo, and then you have to come back to us. So we actually don't trust you. And we are the people that are of a generation of worriers. And we worry, and we shut these things down. And I do think that I've seen that across this region. I see it in other emerging markets. You don't find that at any of the best firms around the world. You definitely do not. And so I think that is a structure to watch out for here.
Sorry, the exit thing, since we're talking about it, and you mentioned exits, and you also mentioned it briefly. Liquidity fund is one answer, but what we really need to do in order for it to be a self-sustaining ecosystem is encourage M&A activity at smaller amounts. I mean, the majority of exits in the US happen between $20 to $50 million in size. So if we can somehow incentivize the large corporates, the private sector, people who have the ability to acquire these businesses at between $10 to $20 million in size, maybe up to $50 million, how do we incentivize them to be active participants in the ecosystem in order for them to be acquirers of the startups at the later stage? So I think the liquidity fund is a great solution now, but the long-term solution is how do we get large corporates and the private sector to engage with the ecosystem, not just from a charity or a CSR perspective, which we're seeing across the region, but from a serious perspective, it's like, I like this company, I'm looking at maybe acquiring it and pulling it into my company, into my conglomerate. And that's really one of the things, the mindset stuff that we want to look at. So
We have 10 more minutes, one here and one here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a comment. I think, if the VC's interest, to make money, they can go and invest anywhere they want, right? This activity is by the SME authority. And so one has to define what the objective is. If it is just by funding somebody who's doing import, export, go ahead and do that. But if it is to bring the kingdom to another level in terms of, diversification and so on, then I think this whole story has to be thought of in a different way. The funding is one thing. But, to your point about moving, let's say, to technology-oriented, companies and so on, then you have to have some system in the background. Otherwise it will be very, very slow, and then the return, may or may not be there. The universities play an important role. I've been active in the region for some years now, and unfortunately, we talk about ecosystem and so on. The universities do not have that yet, okay? And I'm not talking just about a business plan, how to do a business plan and so on. It's much, much more than that. And I would like maybe some to come to MIT, for example, and to see what the ecosystem is within a university that will create, the ideas and the people that are trained. So when they come out, they're already trained. So you don't need to train them and nurture them and so on. So that one within the universities, from the government, I believe that they have to put a new investment or so that goes along with this thing, because otherwise, the people would come out and are not at that level. So this is from the university side. The other thing is in terms of how the whole system works here. Very, very slow. You go to buy anything, right? So if you want these entrepreneurs, to be creative and very فعالين in their work and effective, things have to be done very, very fast. You want to make something, you want to order something, you can get the same day or the next day. So I'm just emphasizing this background that has to be there so that the whole country moves, to a new level. Thank you.
This gentleman, that's good.
So I just want to throw in just a couple of thoughts on the idea of the liquidity. So in my, prior to joining 500 Startups, I've been at 3 late-stage companies, all of which had 500 to 1,000 employees, several hundred million in revenue, and I was the chief financial officer. So a big part of my job was figuring out how does it get financed, and what's the exit. And it does strike me that there are very efficient global capital markets now that provide exactly that solution. Stock exchanges in the US and France and the UK and Germany in particular, and a government-funded liquidity fund or other creating secondary markets around liquidity for early investors. Very, very complicated, very challenging. It requires confidence in the system. It requires liquidity, who's going to buy. It requires markets to work efficiently. And it seems like it's a much better plan just to enable the companies that are started here and founded here to go public in those markets when they need to, or work with strategic acquirers that are already liquid and public. And navigating a public entity it's not easy, but there are lots of people who have done it. Now you're going to have to rely on that help from the countries where those markets are deep and strong. But I think being able to rely on that expertise and that help companies figure out how to do the right financial reporting, the right accounting treatment, I think thinking globally, understanding how to communicate to those public company investors, it's a skill set. And because it's so deep now in the U.S., mostly the Valley, a little bit of New York and the Northeast, there are lots of people that know how to do that could help. It also strikes me that one of the big factors in the Valley is the entrepreneur, and I live in the Valley and Silicon Valley in New York. There's a huge celebration of entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, which I've never seen before. I grew up in Toronto. I was born in Kenya. My wife grew up in New Delhi, and so I've seen these different cities and how they think about the hero in their local area. You're from Washington D.C. In D.C., the hero is the politicians. You go into a local bar, you talk to somebody in a restaurant. Can you believe what Donald Trump today? Or I really like what happened. The news, the headlines, the celebration is all around politicians. In Los Angeles, it's entertainment and media. In New York, sometimes it's financial services or sports athletes or maybe technology. And in the Bay Area, it is absolutely the hero is the entrepreneur, the person who tries, starts a business, makes the world better. Maybe they fail, but they are the story and the hero in every bar. And I think you can do that here. I think you can find your most successful entrepreneurs, or bring in the ones that that want to come here, maybe from the greater region who have an impact here. Have them meet the Minister of Energy and Mining, and celebrate them and promote them and say this is an example of what we want people to be, and that begins to change the cultural mindset. And if there are success stories, you can play those success stories and you can teach them in school, and you can make sure that people have that exposure, because that really then drives this desire to be an entrepreneur. And I think entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs. In the Valley, people want to be around successful entrepreneurs. Most of the successful companies are started by companies by people who have already done it once or twice. Maybe they failed the first time, but very few billion-dollar companies are started by first-time entrepreneurs. It's the exception, not the rule. And bringing in that experience and having them be a resource, I think, is very valuable. And just the last thought, I'd really think about that, the statement that government funding of initiatives is necessary to really make this work. I mean, even in the Valley, the government had a role for sure, it did, but that's not why the Valley became successful. Even today, the most successful tech companies, they don't sell to the military, they don't sell to the government. They sell to consumers, and they're SaaS businesses that sell to big private companies, and the government can only do so much. And I think if you leave space for the private sector to grow and be effective and efficient and competitive and think globally and celebrate this private sector success stories, you'll be in a much better position than if you think about, well, how can the government make this solution better? I don't think that's the mindset you should be approaching it with.
We have one final guy here before we have.
May I just make one comment, if I may? Just to follow on Professor Yusuf Tumi's and your point. What we have not really thought about or talked about in this roundtable is innovation networks and the way they have developed in the last decade or so. What we're trying to achieve here in Saudi Arabia is certainly very possible, but look at how Bangalore or Hangzhou or Dublin or Tel Aviv or all these other cities have developed. They have people who go back and forth and connect to the Bostons, to the Silicon Valleys, and those types of people, you see them all across the value chain, whether it's in venture capitalism, or in universities, or the entrepreneurs themselves, the innovators. And so you see companies and institutions that are forming these collaborative entities. And to come back to the theme of this workshop, I would expect that we would want to be forming those types of alliances between the United States and Saudi Arabia.
Excuse me, Alan Boyce. So myself, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an advisor and an industry expert for a venture capital fund company that just started in the Los Angeles area in the last 2 years. And I want to dispel a myth. Not all of California is like the Silicon Valley, okay? So the state used to be completely disconnected until like maybe 70 years ago when they got a road through the Tehachapi Mountains. The state of California's constitution was written to resolve the fact that 99% of the people that went to the state for the gold rush went bankrupt, okay? And they were all in Northern California. Silicon Valley doesn't actually cover Southern California very well. So Kairos was set up by a trustee of Caltech who was pissed that their IP was not being developed like what Stanford and Cal Berkeley. And so he put in an entrepreneur in residence, which had some experience on the business side, had nothing to do with Caltech's endowment whatsoever, to avoid your issue of, right, the extra set of careful eyes that, get afraid of things. And he had a completely different approach to funding these things. So where Silicon Valley would give a seed round, he gives grants. Cuts the time frame down immediately. Getting involved in presenting to investors doesn't build a business. Where you would be an A round, he would be a seed round investor. And out of that business, which started just 2 years ago, they've got like 20 businesses that are, like, might end up turning into very successful things, 2 of which have immediate application for my businesses. And they just raised a second fund. And here's the thing, don't have such an inferiority complex. A huge amount of the patents in the United States come out of land-grant universities, not the Ivy League, places like Western Michigan. And no VC even knows what city that's in. So there is a huge amount of IP in these buildings here. And they're in the same position as many places in the United States. So, right, I think you need to, right, think about what is right here. You've got all the like this university has got experts from around the world. We've got the best labs. It's like unbelievable, the resources here. And, you know, try to figure out how you can address global market concerns. There's no question about it, right? You're competing globally with the stuff that you've got here. Thanks for the time.
Okay, so thank you very much for all these, for your time and discussions. I think it's wonderful that we have so much ideas here coming out from such distinguishable VCs and professors and investors. I think we have summarized a couple of ideas. We should think globally. We should focus with the entrepreneurs and be fast and take risks, and also find and exit funds for angel investors or a couple of VCs to exit and have the liquidity around. I think these are all wonderful ideas, and we from this Small Medium Enterprises Authority, we're gonna look at these ideas closely, and hopefully we can be able to enable the VC industry in the coming 2 to 5 years from now. And thank you again for this wonderful time.
Thank you. Thank you. In Bali, we have an office in Chile.
Very good. What kind of businesses do you like to invest in?
Yeah.
Do you live in D.C.? I live between D.C. and San Francisco. Me too. It's called Houston.
Mine's more called United. But
yeah, exactly. I do the same thing. Last year, I was probably 30 to 40 seat hour average. Because I've been between San Francisco, Houston, Dubai, and Riyadh.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It was a crazy idea to try to do this, but nobody else is doing it.
idea is to meet at the break do it at 10 o'clock. نجتمع وبعدين by 1 o'clock. I'll keep you posted. It really, and you will meet everyone. Yes. And you will meet everyone. Is mine. I'm reading everywhere. طبعا احنا we do work with you. Endeavor مش كده؟ انتوا فاهم؟ We work with Endeavor. But let's work with you. I don't know whether you know Ala Hashim. Ala now is our managing director for investments. So he handles all the flow and managing the investments. So it's been now for 6 months. I know he talked about it. And I love that. That's the way I can say it. And you know what? Your on-dogs are as small as they seem. Now, I'll tell you the background, and I'll tell you the key that I'm doing in Texas. That's the first it's not and actually if you don't بعدين they're putting a cap on assets under management. Okay. يعني 20 million you can have up to 200 million under management. Okay. So it's like the exemption that the SEC provides the venture capital platform. Okay. So the SEC provides a certain exemption for venture capital as long as they don't do a couple of things. Their assets under management don't run. But the institutions are VC funds have this capital, they can't set anything else. Did you have access to this exemption? Yeah. So if you have something, I'd like to send it to CME so that they know that this is the precedence.
That's an important one not to forget.